This is a production of Cornell University.
That you're lucky enough to be here at the very beginning of a new series. You will be getting notices about future events in the series. You're welcome to come to as many as you want. We do ask you to let us know in advance so that we know we have room for everyone, and it's conceivable that, you know, you might find out that we don't have room for you at the next one, but that just means you should sign up for the one after that. So I'm just welcoming you and explaining how this series works. But now Kate will tell you a little bit about our speaker, and then you'll hear from him. So thanks for coming.
Welcome. We're really glad you're all here. This is a new series that we're running, and it's really for you. Like, we really want it to be for undergraduates and, you know, meeting their interests and needs. So, and we want to just give you guys a chance to informally hang out with some faculty, as well as always get a free lunch, of course. And I am indeed, my name's Kate McCullough, and I am the Director of Undergraduate Studies currently in the department. So if you have questions about the major, or if you just have questions about English classes, you want to talk, you got concerns, you have ideas, anything, you can always make an appointment with me and come talk to me. It's kind of the main bullet point on my job description is talking to undergraduates, and it's my favorite part of the job, so I'm happy to do that. So I get the pleasure of introducing George Hutchinson today. As some of you know from having taken classes with him, Professor Hutchinson is a newish faculty member here. He's only recently joined our faculty, and he came to us from Indiana University, where he had a distinguished chair in English called the Booth Tarkington Professor of English, and he was also chair of the department for several years. And his teaching and research focus on 19th and 20th century American literature. And he does a lot of work in poetry, but he also teaches courses in Harlem Renaissance, the Jazz Age, the environmental imagination. He's got a pretty broad span of interests. And he's currently working on a book on American literature and culture in the 1940s. He's also the author of many, 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 many things. I could read you his CV, and it would take a really long time, but I'm not going to. My favorite book of his is called In Search of Nella Larsen, a biography of the color line, which is a biography of a really important African-American writer named Nella Larsen from the turn of the century, 20th century. He was also, I'm told, a rower in college. Is that true? Yep. Okay. So, and afterward, he will take questions, as Roger said, questions and comments, and there'll be time just for more informal discussion. He'll take questions and comments about his talk, but also about his field of interest or about the English department or basically anything you want to ask. Right, George? Sure. Okay. And again, thank you for coming.
Good afternoon, and thanks for coming. Okay, so how many of you have had friends or family members ask if you mention majoring in English or you're thinking of majoring in English, what are you going to do with that? Has anyone had that experience? Okay, yeah. What do you tell them? This is a real question. What do you tell them, actually? You say, well, it's good preparation for law school? Or does anyone have any brilliant ideas out there? Yeah.
If I'm feeling really facetious, I'll say, oh, I'm going to be a trophy wife.
Okay. Any other ideas? Okay. I want to be able to pass some on to my students and advisees and so forth. I guess my talk has partly to do with answering that question. It's because of those kind of questions, I think, that the Philosophy Club, beginning about 3 years ago, and they redid it last year, came up with the idea of hosting a debate between professors that they called the Life Raft Debate. Actually, this was invented by some school down in Texas originally, and it's kind of spread to a few other schools across the country. But anyway, the premise is that some sort of an apocalypse has occurred, and a bunch of students are in a life raft. There are 4 professors desperate to get a spot on the raft with them, but there's only one space left. So the professors have to make an argument for why they should be chosen. What can they do to help the students survive and then to build a new civilization? So it boils down finally to a question about the ultimate value of each major, right? The event took place last year in one of the big lecture halls here in Goldwin Smith. Were any of you there by any chance? Good. Okay. I don't mean to boast, but of course I won in a landslide. This evidently took everyone by surprise, including English professors. What? They chose English? When it was announced at a department faculty meeting, one of my colleagues called out, "How did you do it?" My sister, who's an elementary school teacher, expressed what most people seem to have thought. "I would have thought engineering or something," she said. And one of the profs was, in fact, an engineering prof. And my father, who was an English major and went on to a career as a businessman, an aluminum salesman, actually, he's always talking about what a great engineering school Cornell has. So he was kind of wondering what kind of Mickey Mouse I delivered that would have won people over to the English major. I should add that the engineering professor also apparently took his suitability as a given because, as he put it, engineers build things. I should add that he invited me out for a beer at the chapter house after the event happened. My triumph was so shocking that a local talk show host who was there for the debate, WVBR, who happens to be an ILR major actually, but was persuaded to vote for English after the debate. She asked me to be her guest on her show over the summer, and I went and spoke for an hour about the English major and things like that. And now here I've been asked to give a repeat performance. Okay, so all I want to say is, "Oh ye of little faith." Okay. What I want to know is, what is the big deal? To me, it's obvious that an English professor would win such a debate. We have enormous built-in advantages. Consider what is the only academic course required of every student at Cornell University, every undergraduate student. Freshman writing seminar. Who teaches the most first-year writing seminars? Okay. English, last semester, taught 66. Philosophy was next with 14. Then came Comp Lit with 9. No other department taught more than 6, and most of them taught only 1, if any. Now, English didn't come up with the idea of requiring such a course. This was the idea of the entire university faculty, seconded by the chief administrators of all the colleges and approved by the Board of Trustees. They all thought that you should all learn to be good communicators in English and learn to read and all these kind of things that go into the kind of interpretation we do in English majors and other humanities majors. So now imagine yourself for the next 10 minutes or so being in that life raft while I make my supplication. After all, what is the English major about? The English major is about the history, uses, abuses, powers, and limitations of the English language. And language is the most fundamental and powerful instrument we have. It's the forerunner of every invention, every technical achievement. Before there was space travel, there was literature about space travel. Literature is the instrument through which all the gods have been imagined and all the religions built. It gives human character to every society, shapes and aggregates individuals, constructs, sustains, and demolishes belief systems. Clarity of language breeds clarity of thought, and vice versa. It wins converts, creates solidarity among strangers, confers leadership, expresses one's inmost feelings and beliefs. Through it, we ask the most fundamental questions about how to live together and what we want in life. A thought or feeling hovers on the edge of consciousness, and when we put a word to it, we feel satisfied. And then it opens a new vista on further experiences. Thus, language grows, and language grows us. English, I might add, has more words than any other language. Does that not make it the best? Okay. Here is the Flammarion Dictionary of the French Language. Okay. It's a nice thick book with broad margins. Nice pictures, some of them in color. They say the French are good at that sort of thing. Here is the compact edition of the Oxford English Dictionary. Okay. It's got over 1 million pages, and you have to read it with a magnifying glass, which they include when you buy it. Here's the Oxford Dictionary of Finance and Banking. And here is the Dictionary of Engineering. I would have brought the Dictionary of Computer Science, Engineering, and Technology, but it was $139 and only 560 pages. Are you kidding? Okay, enough of boasting and finances, especially student finances when it comes to books. Now let me take you back to a moment when the Life Raft had special meaning, the end of World War II. After the discovery of the concentration camps, after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, when much of the world was in ruins, the humanities and literary study gained a new urgency. The problem after World War II wasn't that engineers, scientists, and especially hotel administrators weren't doing their jobs well. The US had all the best engineers and scientists in the world, and most of the hotels. Rather, scientific and technical know-how had brought human civilization to the edge of extinction through a lack of self-knowledge, warped values, abuse of the power of language and of the human mind. This is when humanities departments began focusing more on modern literature, particularly, and on the forms, values, and practices unique to literary and artistic creation. It was a boom period for English departments and other humanities majors. They were considered the core of what was called a liberal education. Creative writing programs began blossoming all over the country, often filling up with returned veterans who were eager to make sense of their experiences and to express themselves. Many of them had been through inconceivable extremes of experience and were suffering a lot of confusion about how to make sense of their lives and how to communicate what they knew to the world. And we had a whole generation of creative writers that came out of that group, basically. Now this brings us to the most personal issue, the problem of meaning. The time will come when no matter how rich you are, no matter how successful and admired you are after building your new civilization, you'll want to know what it's all for. No one can answer that question for you. You must answer it for yourself. Even if you look for guidance in the Bible, the Quran, or the Upanishads, great works of literature all. Looking back over your failures and accomplishments, you won't be regretting the time you blew an experiment or missed a great investment opportunity, but rather all the times you let down the people you most cared about, not through a lack of technical knowledge, but through a lack of self-knowledge or a failure of imagination, and often through a failure of words. Not knowing what word to say, not having the confidence to say anything, or saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. And beyond your personal life is the importance of the collective life of which we're all a part, and the civilization you will build. The greatest failures and crimes of American civilization have been failures of love and imagination. Racism, wars spurred by hatred, misunderstanding, self-deceit, blind patriotism, and perhaps above all, greed. Yes, our greatest writers have also failed along these lines, even as they extended the range of our affections and appreciations. Nonetheless, here the literature of the world is the most capacious of guides. The late great philosopher Richard Rorty used to argue that human solidarity would be achieved not through logical argument, but through people's ability to imagine the suffering and values and beliefs of particular people who are different from themselves, and that we achieve this above all through imaginative literature. Now, once you survive your experience on the Life Raft and build your new civilization, you also want to leave a record of your accomplishments in the form of a mighty epic, for example, or perhaps a sitcom, depending on how things go. So your descendants will have the example and guidance of your experiences, and so they will remember you. The immortal legacies of ancient Israel, Greece, India, China are all embodied in their poems. Finally, while you're in that life raft, and even after you reach land, you're going to get bored. And how do you think you'll amuse yourselves? If history is any guide, you'll do it by singing songs and telling stories. So with that in mind, let me finish with a story. I earlier mentioned the symbolism of the life raft during and after World War II. The longest known experience of people surviving in a lifeboat is of a group of 18 young American sailors, male and female, left floating in the South Pacific for 138 days after their ship had been sunk in 1944. They started out with 3 life rafts that they strung together to make a kind of trimaran. After a while, their morale declined and they started to separate into groups. 4 engineers, 3 guys and a girl, decided to leave the others behind as useless to their survival. They knocked off a philosophy major in their raft, cut their line to the others, and paddled off. After 2 days, they managed to rig up a mast, a sail, and a rudder. After a couple of weeks, able to communicate only through equations, groans, and grunts, they got so bored with each other, they jumped in the water and were eaten by sharks. With the departure of the engineers, 2 biologists and a couple of chemistry majors decided they'd be better off teaming up and leaving the others behind. They did pretty well at first, knowing what kinds of fish, turtles, and seaweed they could safely eat raw. And the chemists rigged up a still to turn seawater into potable water for drinking, as well as a whiskey distilled from algae. They lasted a couple of weeks, but were picked up by a Japanese naval patrol. They were taken to a prisoner of war camp and demanded on pain of death to prove the value of their culture to the world and to explain the influence of Japanese culture on modern American poetry, architecture, and visual art. Finally, they were asked to interpret some haiku. You can guess how that went. Of the remaining 9 sailors, 5 girls and 4 guys, 1 was a biology major, minoring in Japanese, 1 a double major in English and pre-med, 2 were philosophy majors, with a particular interest in Kant and John Stuart Mill. There was also a classics major deeply into Alexander the Great, but she had a minor in math on the side, just in case. There was a guy in industrial labor relations who didn't know what to do with himself in this company. And 1 girl who had majored in hotel administration, but a closet poet. The other 2 were, believe it or not, English majors. The group never figured out how to put up a sail, but they managed to catch fish and collect rainwater for drinking. Having no idea what the future held in store, they amused themselves with stories, jokes, intellectual conversations, and safe consensual sex. After 138 days, they landed on an uninhabited island. The philosophers drew up a democratic constitution, but they couldn't get anyone else interested in it until the English majors rewrote it in a more lively style. Unanimity was achieved with seductive stories of free love and a future multi-ethnic society, enchanting poems praising the beauty and intelligence of the women, and fables of a fountain of youth just around the bend. These masterpieces by the English majors inspired the hotel student to design a resort around the concept with classical motifs, to appease the classics major, who missed the Temple of Zeus and the Roman sculptures in Goldwin Smith Hall. And the ILR student volunteered as assistant manager. They then had a month-long orgy and populated the island with well-rounded children of diverse talents and physical characteristics and excellent skills in written and oral expression. And they called it, in honor of their alma mater, Cornell. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm at your service.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
This is a bit of a surprise for Professor Hutchinson. He doesn't know about this. And I don't know that you were ever told when you won the Life Raft Debate that there was a prize that went with it.
Oh.
And we happen to have it right here.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Oh, that's great.
Life Raft Debate winner, George Hutchinson.
That's great, yeah. Okay. And do you keep this in the philosophy department or something, or what?
I guess it's from the philosophy department, yeah.
Oh, I get to keep this?
You keep it, it's yours.
Oh, great,
So,
wonderful.
I don't
I'll
know
put it
if
up there. Maybe I'll take it out in my canoe next time. Yeah, okay. Great. Thanks. Okay, any discussion? Anyone have any questions or thoughts? Someone asked me where I got that story. Yeah.
Do you think the outcome of the Life Raft Debate would have been any different? And I mean this absolutely seriously. Had venue been Duffield as opposed to Goldwin Smith?
Had it been what?
Had the venue been Duffield as opposed to Goldwin Smith?
Oh, I don't know. What's Duffield? Actually, I don't. I don't. You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe it would have been different. I don't know who the majors were. You know, they weren't mostly English majors. They couldn't have been mostly philosophy majors because the lecture hall was full. And I mean, how many philosophy majors are there? So, yeah. Plus, you know, I was new. I hadn't even had that many students. One of them is sitting over here on the left. But so, you know, it wasn't like I had a big fan base. Yeah, I figured finance and engineering were going to be the toughest competition, and actually they were. They both acquitted themselves well, especially the finance guy. Yeah. But no, I think, you know, like I said, I actually think English has enormous advantages. I mean, if you define the contest in that sense, that you have to build a new civilization, then the importance of language is just hands down. That's going to win the day. And even if you were going to get into practical matters, I bet I know more about digging wells than the engineering professor does, because I was in the Peace Corps for a couple of years. And I mentioned this in the debate. I used to be captain of the crew at Brown, and later I actually even coached part-time while I was an assistant professor, coached rowing, so, you know, I could help people row in the raft and stuff like that.
Isn't that cheating, though? That's an argument for
That's cheating.
George Hutchinson.
Yeah, that's cheating. Yeah, that's why I left it out in this. Of course, I do a lot of cheating all the way through the talk. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
This might be a little different. I'm a junior transfer student, so this is my first really experience in the English department here. But at the MLA convention, I guess maybe it was 1 or 2 years ago, I think Stephen Ramsey said that the digital humanities was about building things. And I was at the digital humanities conference this past summer, and there was a panel session on humanities advocacy, and on a lot of it centered on coding and interdisciplinary work centered in DH that could expand the scope of humanities, working with other disciplines and using coding as a more lingua franca throughout the business world that would advocate for more practical skills. So I was just wondering how maybe traditional English majors went into that, and I don't know what the DH here at Cornell is like.
Yeah, I don't either. I honestly don't have any idea what's going on with that here. Of course, that's an argument. That's a whole different type of argument. That's an argument that, you know, takes as a given the idea of, you know, what are you going to do with your major the day after you finish commencement? You know, walk out and you want a conveyor belt onto a job and so forth. And English has never been that kind of major, really. I mean, and yet, you know, you look down the list of former English majors and they're in all walks of life, and probably a lot of our trustees on the board who were all rich as Croesus, a lot of them were probably English majors, you know, and ended up in whatever they ended up in. Steven Spielberg was an English major, for example. So, you know, you can do all kinds of things. It's very versatile, I think. In the rebuttal period of the debate, I had a list of famous people who were English majors. And I also asked the question, since engineering is supposed to be so practical and wonderful, I said, so what was the greatest engineering accomplishment of the last 100 years? The atom bomb. If we had no engineering or physics professors, there would be no atom bomb, right? And then, you know, when it comes to finances, I mean, I said it would be unfair in this context to bring up who is responsible for the global financial collapse or who was responsible for the Great Depression. You know? So I kind of left that stuff to the side and decided we better not get into the issues about questioning what's a more practical major, you know, versus, you know, one versus another. Any other ideas? Yeah, I ended up becoming an English professor just because I like to read and write. And when I was in the Peace Corps for 2 years, I found that that's what I did during my spare time. And I still wasn't intending to be an English professor, but I thought if I go to graduate school and get a fellowship, then I'll get paid to read and write for a few more years, and then I can figure out what I'm going to do after that. Yeah.
What appealed to you most about American literature specifically? Because that's your specialty.
Yeah. I guess it goes back to high school. In my high school English class, I had a teacher that I really got a lot out of in kind of what the accelerated or honors English or what have you. And reading people like Thoreau and Emerson and Whitman and Ralph Ellison and figures like that in high school that got me into English, and then, but particularly American lit. I guess I just couldn't identify as much, with the literature, with the other literature, the British lit, and for that matter, the French lit, which I read in my French class, or in English class in translation, we would read, of course, the canon, the Western canon. And then in college, I was an Am Civ major. I was equally interested in history, so between the two, but I don't know, I think I just identified with the American stuff, and the issues in it were of more interest to me. And then, yeah, so that's pretty much how it was. Plus, I thought the US is so important to our moment in history, this was like in the 1970s, that it's important for the US to get things right. And for Americans to come to some understanding of themselves as well as of others and so forth. I guess it was something along those lines. But mostly it was just that I really got turned on by the literature. And then in college it was Whitman, the thing that really lit me on fire. Well, we can break and just socialize for a while, I guess. Okay, thank you.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.